Good morning. A warm welcome to the Humanist community in Silicon Valley's Sunday Forum to those joining us this morning. My name is Ray Sunby, president of the Humanist community. The Humanist community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a secular and reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, fairness, compassion, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. If these words describe your thinking, we invite you to become a member of the Humanist community if you have not yet done so. A special welcome to those who are with us for the first time. We invite you to continue listening to our weekly forums and other events. Please aid us in continuing to present these forums by donating to the Humanist community. Membership forms, a list of upcoming events, information about donating, and other information can be found on our website.
Our speaker today, Heather Rigby, is the Director of Communications of the Secular Coalition of America. The Secular Coalition for America, and it's for America, not of, advocates for religious freedom and works to defend the equal rights of non-religious Americans. It represents 20 national secular organizations, hundreds of local secular communities, and uses grassroots activism with professional lobbying to make an impact on the laws and policies that govern separation of religion and government. Heather has earned awards from the American Association of University Women and the Alliance for Community Media. She's presented at conferences on topics including social media engagement and volunteer programs for nonprofits, and served on committees for media organization and a library. She's always had a love of stories that she turned into an academic career dedicated to understanding how stories build community and shape society with a desire to have people's stories take the lead in advocacy. So would you please welcome our speaker, Heather Rigby.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. All of what Alex said is correct. A little bit more about me. I come to the secular community from a background as a secular Jewish person. I was raised in a blended family celebrating both Jewish and Christian holidays from a very secular perspective. And as I've grown older, I've just found that I personally, I guess humanism is very close to what I personally believe. So I do appreciate being able to speak with all of you and work in this field so that I can make sure that all of us get equal representation like we should in our wonderful government. I kind of ironically, the solarium that I'm in right now faces a Knights of Columbus building, and I can see the American flag like waving in the lower corner of the window just across from me. So it's a good setup for today's talk. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go through the presentation that I have, share some information about us. If you have any questions, I will happily answer them at the end. And then I do have a link that I can give you for more information, ways to get involved, that I'll share in the chat after the presentation. Let's see if I can get technology to cooperate. Okay. So, as said, the Secular Coalition for America is protecting the equal rights of non-religious Americans. We are based out of Washington, D.C. I'm currently in Southern Illinois, but I'll be back in D.C. for a few weeks coming up soon. We do a lot of different things, and this presentation will help hopefully make sense of it. We are both a 501c3 and a 501c4, so donations made to us go one of two ways. The 501c4 side is an advocacy group, and so we are able to work with the congressmen and women and try to get things done and actually lobby on behalf of all of our various member organizations and all of the people that they represent. The 501c3 does a lot more education and is a fully tax deductible nonprofit. And if you hear meowing in the background, there are 2 cats stalking me at the moment. I apologize. So a lot of what we do is very much focusing on the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, and making sure that religion is not encroaching on the laws that govern all of us. We very much want to make sure that, you know, one group of people is not having unfair advantages simply because of what they believe in. Unfortunately, we have seen recently that that is going the opposite direction at the national level and in a lot of cases at state and local levels as well. But we are still here and we are still doing the work, and we are committed to making sure that this continues. So the coalition is a group of 20 different member organizations. We have groups that are more broad, like American Atheists, American Ethical Union, and American Humanist Association. But then we also have a lot of very specific groups that help cover unique identities or minority identities, such as Black nonbelievers, ex-Muslims of North America, Hispanic American freethinkers. Secular Student Alliance is largely focused on college students with some high school student representation, and groups like CSJO and the Society for Humanistic Judaism focus on Jewish Americans who are more secular or humanistic in their belief and less theistic. So there's a lot of different things that are happening every day in all of these organizations. Groups like the Clergy Project and Recovering from Religion are helping people who were formerly very tied into religion, particularly members of clergy and people who experienced abuse in their religious communities, to overcome that and find a sense of safety and community, and a way to build, you know, a future for themselves that isn't tied to theism. So if you have any questions about any of those organizations, please feel free to ask me. I can tell you a little bit, but you are also welcome to go and look into them directly. They are all really wonderful and doing interesting things. So separation of church and state can be a fairly narrow or broad topic, and it kind of depends on how you're thinking about it. So a lot of what we're doing is representing the non-theist community to Congress, and that is something that ties into a lot of other topics. So like I said before, the First Amendment, we are looking at freedom of and from religion, so that people who, you know, are atheist or agnostic or just prefer to live secularly aren't governed by rules that don't apply to their belief system. We also are looking at issues of health and public safety, making sure that the entire public is not endangered because of wrong-headed religious belief around vaccines. Currently, we have been advocating on behalf of a bill in Congress, or a bill that is going to the House, based around the health share ministries that are not insurance, but have been really harming a lot of Americans who have bought into them. We are also concerned about topics of education and making sure that students of all ages are able to get a secular education in their public schools. We are against vouchers for religious private schools that take money from taxpayers, which is related to the case Carson v. Mackin that just happened with the Supreme Court this past June, and various other things like school prayer, the Kennedy versus Bremerton case that also came out this past month. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that area right now. We are also, you know, very much concerned about various things such as tax policy. So a lot of churches have been kind of trampling over the Johnson Amendment, which keeps them, or is supposed to keep them, from utilizing their pulpit as a way to promote specific political candidates, and that has not been happening very well. There's been a lot of efforts from Freedom from Religion Foundation and the Americans United for Separation of Church and State groups to ensure that the Johnson Amendment is upheld better by the IRS. And there's been a lot of news that you may have heard about Pastor Locke out of Tennessee, who has challenged the IRS on looking into his church. We are also looking at making sure that science is used as a basis for a lot of different policies, and that science is not held back by religious belief either. So there are technological advancements and medical advancements that could benefit all of us, and often there is religious pushback on those. And so we are trying to make sure that that is not something that is hindered for the greater good. We are very lucky to have the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, and they started just a couple of years ago. It's a fairly new part of Congress. We are working with all of these wonderful people to be able to get their bills publicized, make sure that the public has good information about what is going on, why they're important. We are reaching out to Americans across the board to say, hey, this bill is coming up. Please reach out to your representatives to get them to sign on to be supporters and sponsors of these bills, both at the House and Senate level. If you have a representative who is already part of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, awesome. I highly recommend that you reach out and thank them. If you do not, please reach out and express to them the importance of being involved in this group of people. It would be a boon to be able to see this caucus grow in size and support. Of course, if you want to learn more, you can go to our website or email. I will put my direct email in the chat if you want to talk to me directly after today. And that should help you all out. We are also on social media. Please feel free to follow us. We don't do a lot on Instagram and TikTok right now, but we are hoping to potentially use them a bit more. But if you're on Facebook or Twitter, we are checking in usually every day, except for weekends sometimes. The other thing that I do want to show you that we have available as a resource is our advocacy toolkit. I'm going to maximize my screen here. There's a lot of information in this page of our website. I'm going to put the link in the chat also. Down here, each of these buttons takes you to a different link of information, and you can click on that and go through. It's all fairly self-explanatory, but if you're new to advocating to Congress, this is going to be very useful for you to be able to understand where to get started, how to reach out, what sort of topics are going to be most useful for you, and really allow you to be a successful advocate, both on your own or as a group. So I'm going to unshare my screen so I can get those chat links shared and answer questions. And I do have some information too about the demographics, about the demographics of the secular community as it stands right now. I can share those as well. I just don't have them in the presentation. So give me just a moment. Okay, so the link and my email are both in the chat now, and I am ready to take any questions that are available, or I can share the demographic information and kind of what we've been doing a little bit more first, either way. Don't see. Okay. So some demographic information that I can share is that the percentage of Americans who identify as non-religious is growing. In fact, there have been a few records set in that information in the last year or two. More young Americans are identifying as atheist, agnostic, or none. And we're actually finding that there's a higher proportion of women in that group than men, which is an interesting perspective. Usually it has been a higher percentage of men in most other generations. So that is a new development. We are at an all-time high of about 30% of Americans identifying as non-religious or atheist. So we are a growing proportion and definitely need to be better represented among the other people of our country. So there is actually a larger number of non-religious people now than Jewish, Muslim, or other non-Christian beliefs in the country. So, and a lot of the work that we've been doing has been kind of scrambling because the Supreme Court threw a lot at us all at once. Obviously, there was the Dobbs versus Jackson case that has upended settled precedent for Roe v. Wade and left many millions of Americans wondering what exactly this is going to mean for them moving forward into the future. There's a lot of fear and a lot of concern. There are going to be horrible consequences to a lot of the things that the Supreme Court has set out over the last session. And we are just hoping that we can have the support of all of you with what we're doing and making sure that we are getting good Congress people elected and also working at the local level. Something that has been lacking a lot is local engagement. And that's where the Christian nationalists have really excelled over the last at least 2 decades. They've understood the need of getting into school boards and city councils, being sheriff, getting into the lower level judge positions so that they have experience and sway when it comes to getting into higher levels. And so we need to get people as involved as possible locally to try to start undoing a lot of the damage that's been done.
Let me just comment. I was wondering if that you say recently there are actually more women than men who identify as non-religious. Do you think that's because women have come to the conclusion that religion is harmful to them? That the laws enforce that religious laws generally target women?
I'm not entirely sure. I could imagine that is a part of it. I know, speaking for myself, I find that there's a lot of disparity between how men and women are treated in every religion that I have encountered. And while some religions are less bad when it comes to mistreating women, none of them are really great when it comes to equality or equity or egalitarianism of any sort. There are often a lot of restraints that are put on women, whether it's how they're supposed to act in public, how they're supposed to act in private. And it becomes very difficult to try to live up to those ideals. And especially in a society where we have so many competing roles that we have to fulfill, finding that religion is going to be one of the more difficult ones to live up to, I think it makes sense that women are kind of stepping back from having a religious identity that continues to limit them or limits them more than the roles that they already take on.
Thank you. Also, you talked about the religious right targeting school boards and things like that. Is that relatively new, and can we see the effect of it? Because you also mentioned that young people are more apt to identify as non-religious, which sounds like it's not working, but I don't know how long it's been in effect.
I wouldn't say that it is relatively new for them to be getting into school boards, but it has been a surge of that. And I have seen it in my own community. It's very difficult to fight against people who are using children as their, bargaining chip, essentially. We see this in almost every argument they make, right? It's all about the children. It's about the sanctity of life and making sure that the children have good opportunities. But often these policies that they enact are very detrimental to the health and well-being of children. So when they get onto school boards, they start enacting these sweeping policies of, banning certain topics of conversation, such as, making it so that we can't adequately talk about slavery in the 17 and 1800s in the origins of America as a country, or, making it so that there is not adequate sexual education for students to be able to grow up and make healthy, informed decisions about their own bodies. And these are things that are happening across the country in all communities, including progressive communities, because no matter how much we try, the people who are most engaged in local elections often tend to be conservative voters. And so they're the ones that are making these decisions about what happens and impacts the local level. And I think I'm hoping that there's been a bit of a change in that recently. I think there's a lot of younger people who are starting to recognize that they can get involved in government at the local level. But it is definitely making an impact. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the fact that most textbooks in our country have to be approved by Texas before they get dispersed to the rest of the country. But there is a very large number of textbooks that just do not get out to the public schools because they're not approved, because they talk about evolution, or they include, gay families in the word problems for the math book. These small, inconsequential things become extremely consequential, and they turn them into a battleground for all of us.
Dick, I see you've got your hand up. And you're still muted.
The recent Supreme Court decisions, which have been unfavorable from our point of view, I find often are based on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And I find that very disturbing because I was against that act to begin with. And I never hear that talked about very much. Do you have any comments on that?
The Religious Freedom Restoration Act, I don't have a lot to say about at the moment. However, I do know that, or at least we believe here at the SCA that what has happened is there has been a conversation nationally about religious freedom that has made it so that instead of it being we all live in a country and we are governed by the overall laws, and then people live according to those laws and their own personal values or religious beliefs, that there's sort of been this feeling that everybody should be able to, and by everybody, I mean everybody of a very particular Christian bent, should get to practice their religion freely, regardless of anybody else. And it's definitely a very skewed, incorrect read of the First Amendment and interpretation of what it means to live in a country that has freedom of religion.
But the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was the one that brought in that whole language about if you, whatever it is, seriously or whatever, take your religious views. And that has been quoted over and over again in these Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah, I don't have the wording of that act handy at the moment, and I haven't looked at it in quite a while. So admittedly, I'm a little shaky on it. But I do know that it has been extremely problematic, especially in the sense that the Supreme Court has felt that since it took place, they've been able to do a lot of overturning of precedent previously.
Thank you.
Ray, get your hand up.
Yes, you said that Texas gets to approve or reject all textbooks for the county for public schools. How did that come about? Why is it that way?
That is a good question. Part of it is population. The sheer number of public schools in Texas tends to outnumber almost any other state. And so when publishers are looking to make sure that their books are going to get bought, they get approval from their biggest purchaser and then put them out to everybody else. And that is a sheer capitalism situation. They need to know that they're going to make money off of it. And so their biggest purchaser is going to be the one that makes the most influence on what gets mass produced and put out. Part of it also, I know that there's an organization and the name of it escapes me off the top of my head. There's a Texas school district coalition of some sort that I can't remember, that I know does these reviews. And I don't remember how they became the end all be all of textbook approvals, but I know that it was definitely just largely a numbers game of Texas having so many schools that they have that purchasing power and influence.
Is there any chance of getting a coalition of other states together to counteract that? Like boycotting books that, focus on creation instead of real science?
That is a great question. Is there a chance? There's a chance for almost anything, I would think. Whether or not anybody is willing to take up the work to do that is an entirely different question. I believe that there are people out there who are interested in changing how that works, but I think currently it's a bit of an uphill battle. And so I haven't heard anything about any very specific actions being taken in that regard. But if I hear anything, I will be cheering for it and supporting it.
Is there anything your organization could do to facilitate that by putting out some suggestions to states and so on?
That is a possibility. I will bring that up to my team and see what comes of it. I think for the most part, if that is something that we end up being able to move forward with, we would have to work with the Congressional Free Thought Caucus and try to make something of a national policy for how that is worked out. I don't know how successful that would be right now, because we do have a fairly unequal split in the Senate, or rather an equal split in the Senate, and an unstable House at the moment. Going into November, things are definitely looking questionable for how things go with House and Senate control. So there's definitely a chance that something could be done and that we could talk with Congress and get something passed. But I think we are going to have to, at the very least, wait until after November to see how things shake out with congressional representation.
I think one of the things that would help is to get the word out that this is happening. I was totally unaware of this. And
could I say something?
Many other people are too.
Could I say something about this?
Go ahead.
This is, as you pointed out, this is a capitalist problem. And I don't think Congress can do a thing about it. It's how
that
you
is the
sell
other problem.
textbooks. It's how you sell textbooks. And I've been aware of this for a long time, but I can't imagine any kind of legislation that could change that.
It would have to be education based, something similar to, No Child Left Behind, however you feel about that, that makes some sort of sweeping standardization nationwide for what is expected. And that is going to be difficult in any way, shape, or form to get done.
Well, there was something I watched just recently, which is sort of related to this, and that is that we don't have a national education system. We have individual school boards all over the United States, and they're the ones that order the textbooks.
Can I just say, we've got several hands up. I'd like to go through that. And I'm the first one there. So I just wanted to comment that my understanding of the situation with Texas is we have an organization that orders all the textbooks for all the schools in Texas. And that's a big market. Most other states don't handle it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps if California had an organization that ordered all the textbooks for every school in California.
We have the population.
Combat it that way. But I think you're right. Legislation is not a problem. It's impersonal capitalism at work. Okay, having said that, let me go on to Oded. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have some concern. In one hand, we want the government, either federal or state, will take care of education of children. But by law today, the parents are responsible for the children's behavior till they're 21. Now, if the education is done by the government have to be responsible for the children's behavior till the age of 21. There's no registration about that as yet. That means we as a parents are responsible for the children, but we don't have the power to be responsible because it's taken by the government. What the answer?
Unfortunately, I don't have one for that. I tend to believe that if people aren't going to take advantage of public education, then they're going to do what they're going to do with their homeschooling or private education choices. I believe that a public education is a great education, or it should be. Again, because individual school boards get to make those decisions and different school boards have been, taken over by the religious right, it's impacting what young people are learning. And there's a lot that makes it very complicated. So whether
I have some comments. The first sentence, people taking advantage of the public education. They don't take advantage, they pay tax to get it. It comes right out of pocket. So they don't take advantage. That means they have to buy whatever the government wants to sell them. So the problem is if you have what's called progressive government, the children will learn A. If you have what's called conservative government, the children learn B. But there is time maybe to get A and B to be merged together. We call it education. Like non-religion, that means education will be free of progressive and conservative.
that is a good argument for a secular public education being available.
Paul, get your hand up.
Some others may know more about the specifics of this than I do, but public education is generally left up to the states. The federal government gets involved only where it's picking up the bill and providing some benefit. They don't really get involved in educational policy so far, and I think that's a good thing. In states, Texas chooses to standardize their textbooks, so they, as you've mentioned, have a huge market there and a lot of buying power. Other states, most of them, as my understanding, give much more freedom to the individual school boards. And so that market is much more diverse. There's nothing, another sort of the fact is that educational books, school books, do not have a very large profit margin, my understanding. And so if the publishers have to have a different edition for different states or different locations, it cuts into that margin even more. So I think we're just stuck with that until we get this organization that would be more progressive. I think this is going to be a more pressing problem than it's been in the past. There are organizations such as the Religious Freedom, Religious Freedom organization that was just started, I think last year was their first annual meeting at Notre Dame. And then the one this year, it was in Rome. Perhaps some of you heard Justice Alito's address there when it was just embarrassing. And two, it was kind of scary. I encourage you, anyone that hasn't yet heard it, to look it up. I'm sure you can find it on the internet.
Okay, Matt.
We've been beating the Texas book thing to death, but I remember it used to be that California made a lot of the standards, as California was the biggest, most populous state and required all books to, follow their standards, and everybody followed. And then I thought that more recently, with the advent of like on-demand printing, that just wasn't as much of an issue. Texas is doing a lot, has a lot of influence, but publishers can make a book for each individual state if they wanted to. Any idea if that's having any making any difference in the situation, or what? No,
I actually don't. And there is a potential for that to become a growing influence, and making it so that less conservative textbooks are being put out throughout the country. I think there's a lot of publishers that have been trying to stick to the standard publication model that they're used to. And so that has been part of the problem. But I believe as, you know, more schools, especially after the pandemic, more schools are looking at different resources of how they can utilize ebooks or websites that are interactive to replace the standard textbook, that we might find that there is some push away from the standard model that has provided the conservative textbooks to really take hold. However, I think it will be a slow change, and it's definitely going to be something that I'll be keeping an eye on it because I'm personally interested in it, but I don't know how many organizations are really looking into this with any depth or fervor. And I unfortunately don't have very many contacts who work within education outside of direct teaching in a way that I'd be able to get any information on, you know, national organizations that are trying to mobilize for those sorts of things.
Does that answer the question I was going to ask?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I am slightly different topic, but still in your bailiwick here. I had heard stories about members of the Supreme Court being led in prayer meetings by very conservative, maybe even reactionary Christians. Have you heard these stories, and what, if anything, can be done or at least publicized about it?
Yes, so we have heard those stories and we are very concerned about them. There is actually a bill, I actually don't know if it's been presented yet, but there is a bill currently being put forth, SCERT, the Supreme Court something and Transparency Act. It's basically Recusal and Transparency Act. So the stories that we've been hearing about the Supreme Court praying with people who have then had cases in front of them, or speaking at events or organizations that lobbied very hard for certain decisions, have resulted in Congress feeling that there actually does need to be some steps taken to make sure that the Supreme Court is held to a basic standard of believability, because so many people now feel that Justice Kavanaugh, for example, lied in his hearings before being approved and appointed about, you know, established precedent for Roe v. Wade. There are a lot of concerns about the actual ethics and believability of these justices. And so the act would make it so that there is a standard for when a justice needs to recuse themselves from a trial, because right now it's just left up to the justice to make that decision. If they feel that they can't be impartial, then they can recuse themselves. But there's nothing that forces them to be recused from a case if there is a conflict. And the bill would also require the Supreme Court to disclose gifts and travel expenses, anything of that nature, to the same standards that all Congress members need to disclose that information. And there would be stronger push for ensuring that there is transparency in how the Supreme Court members are approached by individual groups, and anybody who is arguing in front of the Supreme Court would have to note if they have had a personal relationship or a lobbying kind of relationship with the Supreme Court justices beforehand.
Carrying this bill, who's put it forward?
I believe it wasn't Rev. Huffman. I am drawing a blank on names right now, but it was one of the members of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus.
Okay, Dick, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just, getting back to the textbook, one of the things that I've become very, very aware of with myself, and I think it's probably true of all of us, do any of us pay any attention to what's going on in our local schools? Or do we even know school board members or whatever? This has really I've become so aware of this recently that I certainly, the next time there's a school board election, I'm telling you, I'm really going to check out who these people are and find out what they're for or against. I mean, that's just a comment I wanted to make.
No, and that's a really good comment. We all have busy lives. We've all got, work, family, various hobbies, and, our passions that we want to be able to spend time on. We can't always be expected to know every little thing about every single member of government that represents us. And so I understand when people feel overwhelmed or unable to really spend the time to engage in local government, but it is so very important. And I was very lucky. I only just this week moved to Southern Illinois from North Central Wisconsin, and where I lived in Wisconsin, I knew almost all of the school board members and city council members because of the work that I did prior to working with the Secular Coalition. I was in community media, and so we recorded city council meetings, we recorded school board meetings, we made sure that those things were available to the public so that they could see what decisions were being made. I interviewed candidates for both of those boards whenever elections were coming around. So I had the opportunity to speak with the hopefuls and the actual incumbents and, really get a feel for what drove them to make the decision to be involved at that level. And I will never stop pressing for people to try to at least pay attention in the month leading up to an election to these people and what they're doing. They're elected by us. They should be representing our interests. And I believe that, you might feel like you can't get through to your representative in the House or your senator, but it's much more likely that, your local district city councilman is going to be, available to read a letter that you send or available for a phone call. You might bump into them, at a play or something. So you'd be able to actually make some difference talking with them.
Oded.
Yeah, the previous subject was the Supreme Court. I'm very down. I'm looking for the local cities. City of San Jose, city of Los Angeles and Los Angeles are very unhappy with their local judging system, the prosecutors that let criminals go all over the place. Actually, they call for recall for these two public or progressive public, prosecution. And my view is, I think we have to think that the fish start smelling bad from the tail, not from the head. That means we have to look what it really affects us in normal life. We have judge system, but my sister-in-law tell me, don't go to visit me at night in San Francisco. Just try to be in and out before nighttime. This is a fear. And we don't want to live in fear. And we have some law system that is not functions in California. What do you think about that? They are very progressive, but sometimes progressive is just the opposite. You progress in the wrong direction. What?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, you know, conservatives and progressives both have religious beliefs that they adhere to. There's nothing saying that a Democrat can't also be a Christian nationalist of some variety. And we've seen, you know, Democratic hopefuls for president like Cory Booker, who said that he follows his faith instead of his, you know, science and reason. You know, he doesn't see a separation of church and state, because for him, he is a Christian and he is leading the nation from his position as a Christian. So we have to really pay attention to the people that are making decisions for us in government. And I don't know how California handles their sheriff elections or their district attorney elections. I'm not entirely sure if they're actually elected or if they're appointed. I know it's a little bit different in some states. So, you know, you might be finding that there are places that things are just not run right because the people who are getting elected are, you know, sneaking in through, you know, either nepotism or popularity or some other thing that is not actually based on them having good policies and actual skill for the job.
I think the issue is being too much humane towards the bad guys and don't consider the victim rights. And this is the problem. And you don't want to be victims in this environment.
Esther, I see you've got your hand up.
Religious issue. It's a kind of liberal issue. But today, the atheist and liberal sometimes go hand in hand.
Lester, you're muted. You're still muted.
I unmuted myself earlier, but it apparently didn't work. Anyway, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up the point that a lot of this nonsense is a result of a business decision, not a religious decision. The Roman Catholic Church is the most successfully corrupt corporation in world history. And one of their themes is increasing the business, and that involved, well, when the issue of abortion came up, abortion had the effect of reducing the number of prospective business people. That is, it reduces the number of prospective Catholics, and therefore they were opposed to that and took up that position, which happens to be nonsense. But it was a business decision. They were trying to increase the number of clients that were working for them. And one way to do that was to make sure that Catholics had more children. And so, as I say, it was a business decision, not a religious decision. And it happens to be pure nonsense. But that's true of all religions, which are based on fantasies that have been concocted over the years by our ancestors, mainly based on the experiences of our hunter-gatherer ancestors who put a bunch of dumb ideas in our brain DNA millions of years ago, and we haven't been able to get rid of them yet. So as a result, most people make hundreds of stupid decisions every day, and the world goes on heading for total destruction. We're on that road because our brains are malfunctioning, everyone's, including mine, and we need to crawl out of this hole. That's it.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, did the that bill for the Supreme Court, that rules for recusal and so on, who's sponsoring that? I would kind of like to look into it, and I'm not sure.
Give me
SCS?
just a second. I know I
Sure.
have the information about it. I just need to find it. Where did it go? There it is. Let me go ahead, and I have the link to the actual bill language that I can put into the chat if my internet would cooperate and actually load. It's not loading. Okay, give me just another moment here.
Is it Senate or House?
Where did it go? I believe it's at the house. Give me just.
Okay.
I have the link. It's just not loading. Maybe.
Read us the link.
It's a complicated one because it's one of those health
Ah,
house bills. Give me just a second here. Is that the one?
S4188.
Looks like there's a representative named Mr. Whitehouse of all things.
Yeah, there is. Is this the one? This is the one. Okay, give me just another moment to copy that. My touch screen suddenly stopped working. And also my mouse stopped working.
You can read it to me.
It is, oh, copy. There we go. Chat. There, I have got it into the chat link now.
Gov/app details bills dash 117 S 4188 IS.
That's Greg's post. That's Greg's chat. I don't see a chat from Heather.
Oh,
Oh.
apparently it just
Greg's
went
pretty good at
straight
tracking
to,
things down.
hold on. Is that just not going to everybody? That's not going to everybody.
Who did you send it to?
Apparently I sent it only to Dick.
Oh,
There we go. That should be visible to everyone now. Did the same thing happen with my, nope, those, okay. Yep, there we go. It's
That's
in the
because-
chat now.
That's because I sent you a personal message.
Gotcha.
Okay, that and Greg's posted get us the information we need. Okay, you want to make a comment?
When you already just
Yes.
told her. Is it now? You should go to close.
I think we're,
What does she think it's good?
We do have on our website an action alert for that, which would make it so that you can very quickly put together a letter to your Congress reps and get that put out to them to let them know that you want them to either support it or sponsor it. Let me grab the link for that as well.
yeah, I don't have your site in front of me, but if I go to Secular Coalition
There we go.
for America, I assume they're
So, I've just put that into the chat so you can
demand
see.
SCOTUS transparency actions. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And I want to thank you for a very interesting talk, very informative. And Cindy, you had something you wanted to say.
Yes, I was surprised and heartened that the secular balance is shifting toward greater balance, male, female. I believe that's happening largely because of the visibility of exceptional women such as yourself. And I want to thank you from my heart.
thank you. I am just one person doing what I feel is right. So hopefully more of us are able to find ways to do what we feel is right.